To bring in Leslie Sanche and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie's a CBS News political analyst and a Republican strategist, while Antjuan is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist. Antjuan, I want to begin with you because I know you've been in close touch with Democrats on both sides of the Capitol. The majority leader in the Senate's latest attempt to fund the government and raise the debt failed on Tuesday afternoon. At this point, what other options do Democrats have?
Well, I think we have to dust ourselves off and try again. Ed, let's give some background color to actually what this really means. Well, first of all, let me say this. 3 times under the Republican presidents, Democrats and Republicans came together to raise the debt ceiling. Why? Because it is about paying the credit card debt from the previous administration. So the bills we have to pay by raising this debt ceiling will be paying the bills that occurred under President Donald J. Trump. 93% of them occurred under President Donald J. Trump. Remember in 2017 when Republicans passed the tax scam that 83% of the wealthiest folks in this country benefited from the tax scam, and that led to a $2 trillion debt increase in this country. Those are the bills we will be paying coming forward. And so it doesn't make sense.
So what are you going to do later this week? What
I'm saying to you is Democrats will attempt once again to have the full faith and credit of the United States of America on display by raising the debt ceiling. I think we have to educate the American people the fact that this is Republicans blocking it.
So you got to hold a few votes that fail to try to drive home that point, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Leslie, why are Republicans holding out? Why are they opposed to this after having helped do it before?
Sure. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had signaled early on that if the Democrats want to proceed without Republican support, take those votes without Republicans, aligned and in a bipartisan manner, then they can vote to increase the debt ceiling independently of Republicans. And this isn't only Republicans saying this. Strategic pauses have been called by Democratic senators on the left who are concerned about crippling inflation, rising debt, and failure to prepare economically and fiscally for future crises. So this is a bipartisan measure in terms of wanting to take a deep breath about what these spending proposals of the president are about, engaging Republicans in that process. But you are absolutely right, Ed. This is something consistently Republicans and Democrats keep the government moving. But we have to hearken way back to the time when they were actually balancing these budgets and taking into consideration what it's going to need, what the government's going to need in the future.
But, I mean, are you seeing polling or some key race across the country where the debt limit is a big cause for concern and politically it makes sense to do this? Or is this just Mitch McConnell trying to make Chuck Schumer sweat?
Exactly. This is like political maneuvering within the Capitol to try to get Democrats to the table, bring Republicans on board, and take that strategic pause we talked about, not only on the infrastructure. I think there's more bipartisan support, but really looking long-term at the much larger social programs the president wants to engage in. And there's not an appetite, Ed, for any of those.
Right. Kind of trying to divert attention from all that in hopes of slowing it down. Right. Antjuan, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which already passed the Senate, is in danger of failing in the House. I know you read in on this part of it. Can you explain the rift that's developed between the Democratic leaders on the progressive side and the moderates, and why this bill, which passed overwhelmingly and with great public support, is now in limbo in the House?
Well, there was an agreement that came from the Senate that the 2 bills would travel parallel. At the end of the day, Ed, I'm very confident that we will get a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed. I think where the friction or where some of the disagreements may be in the caucus is what happens with the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package that came from the Senate. I don't know if House Democrats can make a strategic move without figuring out what the 2 Democratic senators, Manchin and Sinema, want to do in terms of a price tag. That's why this ongoing negotiation process is so important. You've seen the Speaker and others change tune a bit and saying that we're going to bring a bill to the floor on Thursday to deal with infrastructure. You see some progressives getting on board with the idea of voting on the infrastructure bill first, while the details of the reconciliation bills worked out. But this is normal. I think Democrats operate better under pressure and when there's a crisis, and so I'm very confident in the Speaker. I'm very confident in this White House, and I'm certainly confident that we will come to some resolve that will benefit the American people, regardless of whether Republicans decide to support it or not.
But you guys are having a food fight with the rest of the country watching, and normally the disagreeing happens between Democrats and Republicans. The most vicious, the most aggressive, the most time-consuming disagreements in recent days have been Democrats on Democrats. I mean, it's not a good look for you guys necessarily when you're going into a midterm cycle where you're bound to lose seats anyway.
Well, Ed, you know I subscribe by the Jay-Z philosophy, nobody wins when the family feuds, and so it's sometimes frustrating to watch our own party fight. Well, it's sometimes frustrating. However, here's what I do know. We all agree, along with the American people, above 50%, that the reconciliation package is a must-do in order for the long-term benefits of those who gave us a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. And so these friction arguments, or disagreements we sometimes have within the caucus, they'll be ironed out very well. And at the end of the day, I think we're going to do something that the American people will be proud of and that will actually fill the voids that the $1.5 trillion infrastructure does not do with what is done in a reconciliation package of some number.
Leslie, if the bipartisan bill fails in the House, how would that affect Congress's ability to reach bipartisan deals on anything else?
It's really going to fall. I think Republicans are going to argue it's fully falling on the responsibility of the Democrats. The Democrats are going to own this. Republicans are going to be able to say they made that bipartisan effort, that many, to the consternation of some of the base support, because Republicans were criticized for coming along on that. But they took the effort. They looked toward bipartisanship, and the Democrats are in such a frenzy to have such a grab at taxpayer dollars for a multi-trillion-dollar social policy, as it has been called, that there's not in this hurry to do that, because the clock that's ticking are the midterm elections you just talked about, not having a lot of confidence that they're going to have the majorities to do it post-2022. That's really where Republicans are looking at them in a peculiar way, and it's actually an indication of how confident they feel looking ahead on all these measures. They don't think they're going to have the chance to do it in the future, and that's, I think, Republicans feel very confident and that they're making the right steps right now, and debt ceiling being one of them.
Yeah, by just stirring the pot and watching the Democrats squirm. Antjuan, the president today met with Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema separately, both of whom, of course, have yet to commit to passing the president's $3.5 trillion social infrastructure package, as you pointed out. Remind us why they're hesitant about this. And is the president doing enough himself to engage Democrats and make them settle this?
I think so. I echo the words of President Obama earlier today, saying that President Biden is handling this the right way. We know the process with both Sinema and Manchin is sometimes a marathon, not a sprint. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe that direction is far more important than speed. But Ed, before we get there, I think we as Democrats, we have to focus on this debt ceiling argument. You're talking about 6 million potential jobs, an increase in unemployment to 9%, and a $15 trillion wealth crash that could happen if we do not deal with the debt ceiling. So I think this White House is being strategically careful about what they address and how they address it. So I think there'll be ongoing conversations with Manchin and Sinema, as it was with other pieces of legislation. And at the end, I'm very confident that the Build Back Better agenda, one that polls above 50% among Democrats, Republicans, and independents, will be the political order of the day.
Leslie, Republicans must just sit there and go, look at this. I mean, they're just squabbling amongst themselves, and the president doesn't seem to have any control over them. That's
the one advantage to where Republicans are right now, Ed. I mean, if there's anything that the Republicans are going to agree on right now, let's be honest, there's not a lot, but that's one of them. And we'll take the wins. I think Republicans will take the wins wherever they can get them. They're usually in a difficult posture. The interesting part of all of this is how this shakes out. You asked me earlier, how does this poll, like, where does this go? The unfortunate part of this is the people that get hurt the most are those that are dependent on the federal government, right? A lot of people, if the government shuts down, a lot of men and women in uniform, a lot of people that protect the city, a lot of people that keep the government moving, and it trickles out across the country. And we've seen these shutdown threats before, and we have actually experienced, if you've been in this town long enough, these shutdowns. And those are the people and small businesses that are working with the government, those are the people that are hurt the most, but they always reconcile that. So in many ways, it's this strange threat that lawmakers have in their posturing back and forth. But the bigger questions are, what is the appetite for American voters in support of some of these measures? They want to see something done. They want to see a cooling mechanism to slow down some of these bigger spending efforts. And with regard to Republicans, they think that's a good spot to be in. They are the cooling mechanism in this. And right now, while the heat is on the Democratic side with their infighting, it allows a balance that I think in many cases voters can agree with.
So I just checked, 405 days to go until Election Day 2022. Looking ahead, how might all of this, government funding, the debt ceiling, the infrastructure bill, help or hurt your side of the aisle heading into the midterms? Antjuan, I want to start with you because Leslie should get the last word here. Go ahead.
Well, you remember the longest shutdown in United States history happened under President Trump. Some Republicans will argue it did not have any impact. I think the ongoing news cycle and the political theater that comes along with Washington, D.C. will not allow the midterms to be defined by what happens today. However, I think Democrats have to be extra careful to make certain we deliver on the things we ran on to give us what we have now in the Democratic House, the Democratic Senate, and the Democratic President, in particular, voters of color that delivered for President Biden and this Democratic majority.
Leslie?
On the infrastructure efforts, there is support to see that because those are jobs and those are dollars that reach down into the state. That is an important effort, and that's why Republicans came to the table. They're bringing those dollars back to their constituencies. This government shutdown, nobody has an appetite for that. But it's interesting with Republican voters, they tend to want to see Republicans hold the line on spending, hold the Democrats accountable with respect to how they're trying to expand big social programs. So they're going to get some wins and some positives on that side. But the big issues kind of looking ahead are, is the administration going to deal with immigration? Are they going to deal with border security? And are they going to deal with this uptick in inflation and how it's affecting pocketbook issues? So all of that wraps around into these votes that we're seeing this week. That's the line that I think Republicans and Democrats are looking at in 2022. Those lanes are starting to get really clear, and how the impact of today is going to matter.
Well, we'll get through this week first, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about 2022. And we're glad to talk to both of you, Leslie Sanche and Antjuan Seawright. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.